Good. Okay. Good. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very special geospatial forum and the last event of GIS Week. Been a great week. A lot of really cool events, really interesting talks. And having that said, I want to thank Andrew already said it, but thank again the GGSO president, Kaylin and Izzy, and all the GGSO members, CGA, steering committee, and everyone who contributed to GIS Week. So a big round of applause. But yeah, best way to wrap up a great week is with a great talk. And my pleasure to introduce Dr. Bruno Sánchez-Andrade, and he will be talking today about scaling planetary insights with geospatial data. He brings a lot of experience and a lot of cool background from his kind of past work, over 15 years of working in both the private, public, NGO, and academic sectors. So with that, I'll leave Dr. Sanchez to take over.
Thank you, John. I'm so excited about this short hour. Hope is short, and I'm bummed that I'm not there. I was supposed to be there. You kindly invited me to be there physically, but because these times sometimes it's impossible. So excited to do this. And I guess the first thing and the most important one is that my main goal is to make this useful to you. I understand most people there or watching this on the screen are graduating soon or are graduated looking for jobs soon. And I've been there. I did not study GIS. I studied physics, but ended up working on GIS for many years, being hiring, unfortunately also sometimes firing people. And I am keen to make it as useful to all of you as possible. So I will try to make it maybe half an hour or something like that, so we can do questions and answers, but also please interrupt me. I do not see the people on the camera, so if you interrupt John or someone, just say something and then we can take questions there. But again, the most important thing is that you find this useful. Not necessarily that you agree with me or not, but that you find this useful. When I was at university, I would have loved to ask questions to someone who was lucky to have work, as you say, in small companies, startups, but also big ones like Microsoft, or the public sector like my government in Spain, or the World Bank, or NGO. So without further ado, scaling planetary insights with geospatial data. Many of you know that electricity is really important. Not only provides lengthens the time of the day to do like homework or to work at home, but also provides healthcare, provides facilities. It's really important to provide electricity for the entire world. And in India in particular, there was a big push to provide electrification. And as you can see in this picture, all of what I'm talking about are going to be projects that I work directly. So I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have. There was a big push by the government of India many years ago to provide electricity. And in fact, in this particular village, you can see that they did install electricity poles, electricity cables, and you can use spatial data, specifically from space, to look at India and then look what happened. And if you do that, you realize that this is the light output of this village, and it's not clear what happened. It's a flat line, and that's the story. The story is that the government paid a lot of money to install the power lines, but they did not have power. So we tried to figure out, this is an example of a village that did have electrification and then got electricity. And the story here is that, as I just cued a few moments ago, we do have the information on electrification. This is a composite image of the region, including India, and you can see that there's a lot of light. So the exercise that we did is something you could do now much more easily, which was basically on one side, you have the location of every single village. And then on the other side, you have images at night from satellite images, DMSP or BIRS for those who have worked with that data sets. And then just basically ask the questions for every single one of those villages. Is there light? Is there light? Is there light? And then you plot the thing. What made this project much different, and it's been written for a paper that hopefully comes out soon, is that this data, as you saw here, is every single night. And because this is a composite, when you try to do that every single night, it gets really, really tricky, and you need really scalable computation, because basically you have to calibrate every image. The DMSP satellite was not designed for this, so you have to do a lot of tricks, to very complicated tricks to get a calibrated night every night for every village, and then do that plot. We did it at scale, and we managed to put that into a website. It's called nightlights.io. Sorry for it's in the bottom of the screen, but it's basically a website that you can just go and click every single village, and get a plot of what was the light output for that village, for the province, and for the cluster of villages around it. And indeed, we were able to prove that the villages that belong to that were governed by political parties that were not in the national government tended to lower the electrification, and those who were in the same political party as the government got more. So there was a political use of light. The amazing bit here is that we did this as the World Bank, and the idea was that the World Bank had given money to India to do the electrification, and basically gave the money and asked as a proof of the work that there was lines and there was power poles, because that's the thing that we could measure. But now with all the satellite images and this processing power, we could also tell the government, we will give you the loan, but the proxy or the measure of if this is successful or not is if there is indeed light on that village. That is only possible with the advantages on geospatial data and satellites in the latest year. And thanks to that, then we get to have lights, and then everyone is happy and we fix the problem. Is that the whole story? It's not. And I can tell you many other projects, and I'm happy to do so, where we did an amazing amount of geospatial data processing, and we created a lot of outputs and portals, and you probably know a lot of these portals. And my main takeaway here, thinking about how this could be most useful to you, is that the scaling planetary insights with geospatial data is not really about the data, or it's not really about the tools you do. It really is about then what happens afterwards. Is how do you drive from those outputs to those outcomes? I believe that at the end of the day, your job now and your job in the future is going to be to minimize outputs, make as few maps as you can, in a way, and maximize outcomes, to really help. What happened with the story of what I shared and the World Bank continues to be there. It's a slow process. We have to talk, I'm not anymore at the World Bank, but then we went to the ministry and we saw then what was the data and how they process that. And we trained the people in the ministry to replicate the things. We told them how things are working. We talked also with the World Bank operations team to figure out how we can structure the loan operations and the procurement so that this could happen. Making the map is probably the most fun. It's probably the only thing that you know how to do today, but it's not really the whole story. You need to work with a cluster of or more people to understand all the political, diplomatic, economic, all of these things to then drive those impacts. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what, unless you're a consultant because you are paid by outputs. Your job is going to be to help drive those outcomes. So here's a choice I'm making to all of you now. I have all of these projects that, believe me, I can speak for 10 hours on each of those. I just spoke about the rural electrification in India. I led and created the Planetary computer team, and I could speak for hours about it and probably have questions about it. There's also a project in Philippines reducing traffic in Cebu, where we use geospatial data from ride-sharing apps like Grab and others to optimize and minimize the directions for a fleet. We also use drones in Kosovo to support women's rights and land titles. We also figured out what highways to fix in a province in China to maximize the impact in the province. I built, I left the World Bank then, and then I moved to Bhutan, and I built a logistics system for the biggest employer of the country, which was an amazing project using OSM, OpenStreetMap, and OSRM routing engines. And it was an amazing story how, again, it's not just the data, it's then how you train the people, how then when you leave, things continue to work. When COVID happened, I worked with my government and Facebook and the World Bank to optimize location and hospital resources. And when I worked at Mapbox, which is a company you might know, I was in the beginning, I think employee 4, 5. One of the coolest things we did was working on cloud-less Landsat. So this is a question now for you. Do you want to talk about these projects? Or do you want me to talk a little bit more about that idea of how do you help maximize these impacts, not really focusing on a more bigger picture of things? So what do you think? For those in the room, just shout it out. And those in the chat, you can put it there.
Take a quick poll and there.
It's not that loud, sorry.
Projects.
Sorry, John?
No, we're just taking a quick poll to see kind of
Okay,
what
cool.
the audience is.
I can also go quickly through those.
Yeah, sure. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go then to, you want me to start with a bigger picture, or you want to start with the projects?
Big picture.
Okay, big picture, great. So I love it because look, you can get this everywhere. I'm sure you have people talking about these things, Google Earth Engine and Planetary computer. It's all great and it's all fun, but at the end of the day, you're going to be looking for jobs and living in a society that is really facing incredible challenges. COVID and the recession that is hitting us, climate change, biodiversity collapse, war in Eastern Europe with Ukraine and the invasion in Russia. It's tough. Not only that, not only if you talk on those, but if you go to the World Economic Forum, as some people say, the people in power, Davos and these things, and they ask them, what are the most severe risks at the global scale for the next 10 years? And they made a poll and they made these things. And you can see, even by the colors, a lot of these things are the same thing. It's nature, it's environment, it's biodiversity, and things that cascade because of the challenges of environment. Like if we don't have a good, if our climate is disruptive as is expected to be, it's going to impact the healthcare, it's going to impact health, it's going to impact food, it's going to impact all of these things. But also look at this list and tell me that not all of these things have an extremely strong geospatial foundation. All of these things occur somewhere, and you have to have the data to understand it, most of these things. And if you don't like the WEF, the World Economic Forum, fine. You can even look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the 17 goals, you can read the titles there if you don't know, but at this point, I think almost everyone knows this. You can go down the goals into the metrics. There are 269, if I remember correctly. And I did the exercise a while ago when I was again at the World Bank, and roughly 1/3 of all these metrics are geospatial. 1/3 of these metrics could be proxied with geospatial data, and 1/3 are not related to geospatial, like laws and things like that. But geospatial, my point here is that geospatial is at the core of what the world needs today, in terms of, if you want to think about it, moral needs for the world, but also where the economic power and the political power is, looking at the World Economic Forum things. So if you have a classical view of the world, data brings knowledge, knowledge brings insight. We don't do better because we don't know better. So fine, if a lot of these things are geospatial, we are all geospatial people, let's just throw data at the problem. And it's amazing. We live in you are gonna go into the job market of the real world, in a sense, with an incredible amount of data. That graph is from TerraWatch, and it's the commercial sector, but it does not include what I think is the biggest source, which is the public one, the tax-paid one, the Landsat, the MODIS, the Sentinels, the weather stations. And there is no shortage of data that you can work in these issues. But as you might be curious from what I've been speaking so far, I really don't think it's about data. That's not how the mind works. It's about understanding, with data at hand, data informed, not data driven, how you understand other considerations, like in the case of India, the political considerations, the economic, diplomatic, blah, 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 all of these things. And not only data, we have a ton of platforms. It's even a joke that I tried to put here. These are taglines of different platforms. So, because if we were in person, I would do the thing live, but since it's website, then I'm going to just read them and then you need to guess. So, which platform you think says that is the most powerful GIS software? If you have ideas, you can also put it on the chat and you can say it. Well, that one is, let me open the queue that I have here. I don't know if someone has guessed it. You can tell me afterwards, whoever is in the room, if people have guessed it or not. So number one is Esri. Esri is the one who says that we make the most powerful GIS software. Another one is we have redefined the Earth imaging pipeline to deliver insights directly to you at a rapid speed. Like, how could you not fix the world's problems with platforms like this? That's Planet. The third one is we provide everything you need to create and embed Earth observation insights into your application. That is UP42. My point on this slide is not to criticize all of them. They're amazing, but it's to say that to me, it's a proof that we live both in extremely exciting times when it comes to data and tools, but it's not about data and tools. It's about something else. So what's number 4? Fastest and easiest way to use location data to answer your organization's questions. That's cool. That's also Esri. Multi-petabyte catalog of global environmental data with intuitive APIs, flexible environment, the Planetary computer. 6, planetary scale platform for Earth science and data and analytics. I don't know if some people would guess this one. Google Earth Engine. Build planetary scale applications in the cloud with open geospatial data. AWS, Earth on AWS. A platform specifically designed for massive geospatial temporal query and analytics services. IBM, who knew about IBM had a platform for geospatial analytics? They do, and it's pretty cool. Create, edit, visualize, analyze, and publish geospatial information. QGIS. It's kind of the more like descriptive of all. Single, reliable source for growing geospatial intelligence needs. That's Satellogic. Enabling a better understanding of the physical world through scalable analysis of geospatial data. The Descartes Labs. And the last one, we make satellite data easily accessible for you to be browsed or analyzed within our cloud GIS or within your own environment. That is Sentinel Hub. I don't know if you guessed these ones or not, but look, that yes, some people, Julia, guessed the number 2. These are all amazing platforms. And if on the face of it, it would seem that that's it. Like, okay, we don't need anything else, that we're going to solve all of these problems. Food solves, use any of these things. National security, use all these things. And I would say that because of these things, because of the hype of these platforms, or this thinking that we don't do better because we don't know better, we've seen a lot of VCs putting a lot of money for companies, which I would argue are not that much more what you could do with public data, Sentinel and Landsat. I strongly believe, and I have worked in some of those, and I have been in part of VCs to do the due diligence for those, and I strongly believe, and I work with lots of data, 80% of what you will ever need to do on GIS can be done with public data, Sentinel and Landsat and MODIS, and free software, QGIS, Python, all of these things. Doesn't mean that is all you need. It's the remaining 20% that is going to pay for 80% of the cost, all of these things. But I don't think the world either agrees me, maybe I'm wrong, but genuinely, and I would love to have a little bit of a discussion at the end, if you want, about why this might or might not be the case. Okay, so that's all of these platforms. At the end of the day, if you want my opinion, there's 4 platforms, 5 if you count AWS, that and I think people will not be that frank often, but now since I'm not working anywhere, I can be frank with my opinions. So I think you're going to be using we're going to be using most probably these 4 plus. I don't consider AWS a platform because it's just a pile of files. That's the strategy of AWS. It just piles in plural because it's totally distributed, piles of files. And you're going to be using a ton of Google Earth Engine, which is great because it's a standard, it's free, it's cloud native. It's isolated in the sense that you cannot really mix it with your own data easily, but low lights is outdated, stale, it's a 10 years old technology, it's a black box, there's no SLA. The SLA they just announced is a joke of what they're offering inside the SLA. I'm sorry, and I love Google Earth Engine, but just read it. It basically gives you half the money back if there is a 97 or less % uptime. ArcGIS, it is often not really liked by some people, and I genuinely believe it's a fantastic product. It's very expensive, and independent when you end up working, it's going to be the one you use. Part of the reason is that it's kind of the only one where there is an actual company on the hook for it. If you have questions, you reach out to them. And in my experience, they really answer back quickly and they have a great support. And depending on what you are, it's going to be the one that is going to be used. So it's good to know about it. Planetary Computer is the one that we design and we build. It's already the largest open index and repository of public data. It's a new one in the low lights, new platform. There's no SLA yet. So yeah, and it's really integrated. One of the really good things of AWS and Azure, less so Google Earth Engine because it's kind of isolated, is that it is in the cloud that anyways your company or your NGO or university is already using. So having that platform in the cloud you are using is kind of unbeatable. That was part of my pitch inside Microsoft to build the Planetary Computer, is that it's kind of a obvious choice to have this platform. And if you base it in open source, then it's easier to build. QGIS, you're probably going to use it a ton, mostly because it's free. And it's a great product. Okay, so that's the end more on the more geospatial. I really want to emphasize this slide, which is, to me, the one I can give you that can have the most value, which is 14 books that I hope can help you drive that point that I made. That is not about outputs. It's not about data. It's not about science even. I'm a scientist and I believe in science. I don't need to believe in science. Science works. But the world doesn't change on data. The world moves on people and stories. And these books are the ones that tell you why and how Impact Science is the one I wrote, which summarizes a lot of the other ones. It's free. I can send you the link. When it's not free, you can buy it in Amazon, but I can send you the link to the whole text. If you want, just ask John, and John can ping me and I'll send you the link to that. Factfulness is about that idea of data, but also pinging a little bit of that impact. Humankind is about a positive book on humans in a world where everyone is polarized and negative. It's a really good book to read. Inferior is how science, specifically in health, but applies to a lot of science, has not seen women, basically, has imposed abuse of men by men to women, it's really infuriating to read this book and really important. The fifth risk is basically also, it seems to be about Trump and it seems to be about politics, but it's actually about the role of technical people in government and the role of scientists in government. Nature and Nature, for those who work on biodiversity or climate change, which is most of you, it's a really good one. The band played on is similar to the one of Inferior in the sense that this talks about when science failed and was tone deaf to the actual needs of the world. And this is about HIV and AIDS and how we just didn't do what we had to do for a long time. And then it was the opposite. And there were two teams that were competing for the Nobel Prize, and the scientists, academics were just fighting each other, and that costed thousands of lives because of the way scientists behave. Learning by Wholes is a really good book about how you should learn things and how you should teach things, which is opposite to what most of us had taught, which in a nutshell is that when you learn baseball, you don't sit down in a classroom to learn the rules of baseball. And then after a semester, you go to the field, you just play baseball. And then when you play, you start learning the rules. And if you're not good at some things, you practice those. It's learning by wholes. We tend to learn GIS or math or anything really like the basics, and then more. Story proof is about how absurdly efficient and important it is to tell everything like a story and why that is. It's a really good book. If you only read one book, let it be that one. Pointless Rewards is about how we all move by intrinsic motivation, not by extrinsic motivations like rewards or grades or punishments or bonuses. Nonviolent communication is a really important one as a scientist, to figure out how to talk with people who do not believe in what you're doing or do not understand it or don't want to understand it, especially on climate change. Knowledge and diplomacy is about how it's not about knowledge. How if you just take the best people on a certain topic, you might end up with everyone, or I don't know, your university or Harvard or Stanford or whatever. But if you want to do something that is truly going to work, you need to have a representative of the people who is going to be affected by those things. That's why you have to combine geographic representation by meritocratic representation. Carl Sagan, you probably know, and the Great Rhino is about things we all know, but do nothing until it's too late, like climate change. I'm going to pause here for a second because it's half an hour. I have a few more slides on these books if you want to know more, and then I have a few more slides for each of those, or we can go into questions. How are we doing? You find this interesting? John, read me the room.
What do you guys think? Go into the project? Yeah, I think the consensus is to go into the project.
Okay, so I talked a little bit about let's go, for example, with the COVID ones. This project was early 2020, where we really didn't know what was going on, and we needed a way to figure out where the hospitals wouldn't be under most pressure. And we had to find a way to do it. This was the World Bank that could work pretty much anywhere in the world. Because if you do it for the US or if you do it for Europe, it's not going to be the same that if you do it for Ghana or for Ethiopia. So what we did was to take, this is the examples on this slide is from Spain, but it works anywhere. So basically we took, HDX has a repository of population density by a square kilometer. So you basically pretty much from anywhere in the world, you get an estimation of the population of every pixel at a square kilometer one. And then on OSM, we OpenStreetMap, you get the locations of hospitals. Might not be the best, but it's a first approach. If your country has a public data set of locations, you use that one, which is the case of Spain, which was not that different to OSM. But then you need to realize that sometimes there are moon times in between the location of the person and the hospital. You need to be aware of the roads and aware of the geography of things. And maybe the one that seems the closest is not the one that is the closest. What you need to do is as realistic as possible and scalable as possible, because you want to do this for 50 million people very quickly and iterate to see what happens, is the distance in time, not in space, that those basically are the isochrones or the things you get with, for example, OSRM, which is OpenStreetMap Map, I think it's called. It's also open source. Basically, you get a location, origin, destination, and it gets you the turn-by-turn directions, but also gives you the time. And you can put a profile on walking, on bikes, on vehicles, or whatever thing it is. So we chose by car because we assumed that it was going to be fairly sensible. We can also do it for bikes or others for other countries. And basically we wrote the code, which is available if you want to take a look on GitHub. And you end up with a Voronoi-ish, because it's not space, but it's time, of the places where all go to the same hospital. And that's the map of the tessellation of that place. And then you can also plot how much time, because you have that data, how much time it takes by car to get to those places. You can, in the map in the left, what we graphed is if it's more than an hour, it's a problem. So if it's more than an hour, it's a problem because there's a relationship between time to go to the hospital and increased mortality for many reasons. And those are the areas that we wanted to focus on. And then you go back to your population densities and you can multiply every pixel on each of these time stamps for the population of that one. And you end up with, in this map that I did in Mapbox, the transparency is the number of people and the color is the time to get to the hospital. And it so happens that close to where I am from is the place that has the most people farthest from a hospital. So then you can focus on those places and you can tell the governments, hey, these are places that you might have problems because of these drivers, or maybe I'm wrong here, there's a hospital, you should put it, or if some vaccines need to be refrigerated and because of these people are farthest, then you can start to think about the logistics of how to account for the needed number of expected vaccines that need to be refrigerated for X amount of time to get to those people. But even most importantly, the same data set has the population break by ages. And one of those breaks was 60 years old. So one of the things we did, and the hospital data we had also had beds. So we can focus on the places that are farther from the hospital with fewer amount of beds compared to the population they had of all the people, because we knew at the time that this was going to be a problem for COVID. And this is how we got to a fairly globally scalable that runs in roughly, for the whole of Spain, if I remember correctly, this script ran in 5 minutes. Something that you can then go to the government of any country and say, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about your needs for hospitals, let's talk about your cold chain logistics, let's talk about your expected Deaths is you're not able to provide these facilities to these people and the pressure you are going to see because of the population that are older on the number of beds you had available. All of this with the code links and everything is part of this facility that I helped the World Bank create, which is called the Development Data Partnership, which is basically a way for companies to give data to governments and the World Bank to work on these kind of issues. In this case, we actually didn't use any Facebook data, but they help us with some data and we ended up not using, and that's why it's highlighted on that page. That's one of the projects. And questions on this one or other questions so far?
Yes, we have one question.
Yep.
So at the beginning, you talked about minimizing outputs, maximizing outcomes. So once you created these COVID maps that talked about hospital beds and distance to hospitals, did this result in any like new hospitals being built or any other decisions that you can trace back to these maps?
Yep, this is a really good question. In this case, so here, the thing is that we love GIS, and that's why I'm keen to show you. I've given you way more detail that I gave the government of Spain when I presented this, or what the World Bank was thinking about these ones. They basically wanted this plot, or you can do other plots. They might not even want a map. There's a map on the right, which is the red dots in the places that are the farthest with the most amount of old people. The philosophy of the minimum amount of outputs, it's because it's easy if you start thinking about this one, and if you start thinking about this plot, isochrones, or even this one with a ton of data. This one actually you can zoom in and out, and it tells you the time and the people and all of these things. You drown in data, and it's really easy to drown in data, especially those who are not in a day-to-day with data. They just lose interest and they don't know what to do with it. So that's why, even though it's extremely uncomfortable most of the time, you need to make a ton of judgment calls and reduce that data into one thing. Or even this is too complicated. What at the end of the day they want is a list of places that are a concern and why there is a concern. It is a philosophy that I have of minimizing outputs. It's always against my intuition. I want more plots, I want more data, I want more improvements. And when you are in university, you are trained for excellence. You're trained that it's always good to rethink a better way to do it, to improve it incrementally. When you go out there, in my experience in companies or in the public sector, you can't do that. You can't afford to be driven by excellence at all costs. You need to figure out what's good enough and ship it. And if there is internet and opportunity to make it better, you will make it better, because obviously excellence is good. But there is this tension on my training, this tension of what you can do better. But that's not how things change. I can give them a really complex dashboard portal with all of these parameters to tweak about and do comparative analysis and scenarios, but it's gonna be, at the end of the day, mostly confusing, unless the few technical people that I can then go and tell them, look, this is how you do it. This is, if you need more questions, that's how you do it. But that's the tension that I meant. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you. Any other questions?
I don't have questions on the chat. I don't know if there's other people in the chat or not. Is there? 16 people.
So I had a question about, I was hoping you could talk about one of your projects or your project that you felt had the most tangible community outcomes or community impacts, like why you felt that project was the most successful.
Well, that's a good question. I think the one I'm going to tell you is the one I know, but I've realized that sometimes you do things and then you don't know anything else and you just don't know. Like a few months ago, someone told me that a workshop that I did on OpenStreetMap in Panama was extremely influential because it not only helped make the map in Panama better, but also drove people together. This sense of community is extremely important. And it really puts not only technical people together, but also people that were non-technical, but were keen to help in the issues that they were having. It was the same in Bhutan. I'm happy to tell you details, but this is basically the map of the thing I had to do of logistics, color-coded also by time. And Bhutan became one of the most, if not the most actively mapped place in the world compared to its size because of this project, because I needed logistics for this thing, for the company that I was helping. And the roads in Bhutan are extremely hard to follow. But at the same time, Bhutan is a very small country where everyone knows everyone else. So it was fascinating when chatting about the struggles I had to figure out transit times to places because the roads were not mapped, that my traditional way was to train people to trace and things, and we did that. But the spot check analysis I realized I could do is that everyone knew someone anywhere in the country. So it was literally a phone call away to say, hey, the system says it's 2 hours to get to your city. Is it true? And they say, no, it's 3 hours. So it really helped bring everyone closer. And I believe it had a tremendous impact in the country of Bhutan, because then everyone knew about this map that anyone could use. And it was really important because, again, this is the biggest employer of the country, but also the maps were really important for many other reasons, obviously, for transportation, for seeing your family, for seeing improvements. But the one, I'm having a bit of a long answer. One of the projects I loved was this one, which was women's rights in Kosovo. The idea here was that this is this ballet called Krusha Emade, which there's a little picture here, that during the war was every man and every boy was killed, and were left only the women and the girls. And because land titles only went to men and they were all killed, and all the land titles were burned, they had no land rights. They knew whose land was it, but they had no formal land rights. So when they created cooperatives to do things, and then they needed loans to invest in themselves, to invest in these cooperatives of, they were growing peppers. And there is this traditional pepper thing that it tastes amazing. And they basically grow the peppers and cook them, and they need loans, and the banks would not give them loans because they don't have land titles. How do land titles work typically? The World Bank is involved in these things. Every 10 years or so, they hire a plane that maps the entire country with high accuracy and high resolution, and then that goes through a regularization process, and that's how they do the thing. Because that takes 10 years and is millions of dollars, it's really hard to update those, and they didn't have time to wait. So we came in with the innovation labs and we said, hey, we can fly drones. And we can fly drones with, if we use enough, I'm missing the word, but basically when you tag a place in the ground and you put the actual location with high precision, and then you rectify like this ground control points. Yeah, but when you put those enough ground control points, you can get quality enough that it's accurate. So we went to Kosovo with a drone, a war-torn region, and we flew drones in the entire valley going back and forth to map the thing. And obviously, I mean, doesn't make much noise, but people were curious. It's a small place, and people started to gather and ask questions. And then they started to bring us food and ask more questions. And they say, oh, this is really interesting how we do that. And we started to teach them how to do these things. And as the prices of drones go down, then they get easier and easier for them organically to make these maps. Now, are these maps going to be the ones that are used for land titles? It's a question that remains to be seen, because that's a process that still has not finished. But has this project empowered the community, skilled up the community, and brought them together to embrace things that they would have been afraid of, like drones? yes, yes, and yes. And it was amazing to be part of this project. It really brought in a lot of lessons, like talk with the community, really integrate them into these things, understand the issues and how you can overcome the challenges, like in this case, the 10-year delay. And if you Google Kosovo drones World Bank, you will also see that. And by the way, in the process, we discovered some ancient architectural things that I think they're going to protect too. So that was really cool too.
So I think this project sounds really interesting, and I just had a follow-up question to this project.
Yeah.
How does having an accurate, updated map like lead to the women in these communities getting their land rights back? So like, how would having an accurate map lead to them getting something that they didn't actually have the records for?
So it's a legal question. Everyone knew whose land was whose formally in the community. But if you have a cooperative and you want to buy a fridge or you want to buy a big pot to cook all these peppers, then you go to a bank and you ask for a loan. And the loan says, great, I'll give you the money, but what's the collateral? If you don't pay, what do I get in return? And they have a great collateral, which it's the land itself, which is the traditional thing people do. You put your own or part of the land as collateral, and then you get the loan. They could not do these things because they did not have the titles because they were burned, and the people for whom the land rights were given were also the men, which were also gone. So they did not have the legal rights to put that collateral for the loan. Does it make sense?
Yes, that definitely makes sense. I was just curious about how having an accurate map would get them the legal rights.
Because that's how what you use. So you take the map, you take the map, you print it out. There's a process, and the first part of the process is to ensure that map has enough accuracy. So once that's checked, it's a technical thing. Then you print the maps and you put them in the center of the community, and then everyone with what you think is the right owner. And there's a process by which, if someone disagrees, there's a dispute process. And if everyone agrees, then after that time, they convert those maps with the owner into titles. Does it make sense?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you for the
Yes.
clarification.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Is the legal process still in the, is not determined if people can use it or not?
It has not finished. This is again the story like India. Like, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but this is the fun part. This is the easy part. Even though it's extremely technically complicated, and you can imagine, I don't have the picture here, but we were processing this like crazy because Kosovo didn't have great connectivity at the time for processing the maps. This is the easy part. Then you need to talk, which is the actual goal. As sad and cynic as it may sound, the actual goal for the World Bank here was not to help just these women, was to break the mold to the World Bank and to break the mold to the government that you don't need to wait 10 years to make a land title. You can do it with drones. And I do not know if this happened already or not. I suspect it did not, which is sad, like the case of India, is not integrated yet. But do not discount how extremely valuable it is to break the molds of these institutions and innovate in ways to not only show the output. This is an output. What I'm showing you here is an output. The outcome is the land titles themselves. And it's a fight that it takes time to do, but it's worth doing.
We have a question in the chat if you want to
Yeah.
open open up the
Yeah,
chat.
let's see.
I'll
Do
relay.
you have any general good practices to include or involve users as co-producers of knowledge? My main advice on that, and I guess I don't need my slides. I can put the slides back. My main advice is this is what I mentioned in the book as the most important. Do not discount the power of stories. I think day after tomorrow, you might not remember me, but you might remember the story of Kosovo, or you might remember the story of India, because it was a story. It was not, or even the hospitals it is. The good practice is to try to do projects, entire projects. Again, this could be outputs, but outputs towards an outcome, and tell them as a story or write them as a story. I've hired people, I've been hired as an GIS expert, and I've hired many engineers and GIS experts and others. And I don't look, I'm sorry to say, I don't look at the degree. I'm looking at what you can do for me on day one. Like, I don't want to micromanage you. I say, hey, I have a problem. This is the thing, this thing is happening in Kosovo. Do you have a solution? Can you think of a thing that could work? And if they say, oh yeah, we can do it with drones, this is how it works, this is how it would take, this is the resources, let me just go on there and do it. That's what happened in my case. There was this problem and they say, hey, can you help in this situation? And I told them that I could do it. That was the story and that was the project. And when I explained that story, it has helped me to, like I'm doing now, to see what GIS could be or what value I could bring. So good practice, make projects as complete as possible, make them stories. And what you do is better what degrees you have. The degrees you have are helpful for the day 100. On day one, I care about what you did because I want you to do things. If you have a degree, it tells me that you know how to learn. And learning to learn is an extremely valuable skill because then you grow in your team. And if you have a degree, I would imagine that whatever you know day one, you're going to know much more on day 100. That's when I think the degrees take value.
Questions? I guess just based on your answer and your response to like creating solutions based on problems, I was wondering if you could speak towards what was your rationale for like the inception of Microsoft Planetary Computer, if the solution had already or some solutions had already been in place. If you could talk to us about that.
It was different rationales for different people. So there is a technical rationale. There is also a commercial rationale. At the end of the day, Microsoft, it's a commercial company. And there are, again, it's who you're speaking with. I needed to put myself in the shoes are the budget of the people that empowered me. So for them, I was basically what I said here. Look, AWS and Google have amazing geospatial capabilities. Microsoft doesn't. Not only you should be there, you can be ahead of them, way better than them, with extremely low comparatively effort, if you do it open source. If you open the index, if you have an open index based on open standards, if it's modular, if it's the way I wanted to build it. So that was basically the business case. I genuinely believe there is no contradiction between doing everything open source and having a very healthy business model to power whatever thing that people need to do. Because the hard part is not the data itself. The hard part is to integrate into whatever you are doing. If you are, I don't know, whatever, your own universities, you have needs to evaluate your assets and to evaluate planning and all of these things. And if you have all the data you need and all the tools you need in the same cloud, you're going to go with those. You're not going to go to Google Earth Engine if you have everything already in the same place and you can do it with your own technologies. On the technical side was the realization that there did not exist a modern geospatial platform. We had modern programming language, we had modern technologies, modern standards, but no one had put all of these things together. And I saw tremendous potential to my mission was not to build a platform. I was joined as a director of AI for Earth, which was a $50 million program to help with practitioners of conservation and sustainability use AI and technology to do that, because those who tend to know geospatial or AI do not know about sustainability, and those who know sustainability don't know about these things. So the Venn diagram doesn't work. So as director of that, I realized that when we gave people credits on Azure, they used credits on Azure, but that was not really something meaningful. It was not really helping them. But what could really help them is to lower the barrier a lot to use geospatial data, to explore the data that genuinely believe did not exist anywhere else. And that's why when you go to the planetarycomputer.com.microsoft.com, you have an explore button and you can go. I'm happy to show there's only 3 minutes, so maybe not. If you go there, you can explore and you can quickly render live any byte of data coming from satellites without any work. Not only that, you can click a button and you can see the code in Python to then start working if you are an analyst. And if you're not, you can just share the link and do those things. That was my thinking. This does not exist. This should exist because we could do it, and the world, I think, needs it to drive those impacts. And if along the way we push others to do better, then fantastic.
Great, thank you. We have 2 minutes or 3, maybe 2 minutes for questions. How about the chat?
Even comments or disagreements, anything you want to ask or complain.
Oh, we got one.
Yeah, one question I had is one piece of advice you wish someone would have given you as you were kind of finishing up your PhD and finishing up grad school, for a lot of us who are hoping to work in some of the same industries that you have worked in and have experience in.
I brought a book about that question. I brought the book of Impact Science exactly for that reason. I brought the book I wish I had read when I was in your situation. And again, just ask for, it's not a long book and it's Creative Commons, blah, blah, blah. You can take the whole text. My biggest insight is that the world needs your skills, because there's a tremendous amount of data and tools that are really complex to work with, that can have the impact we need and the impact that provides the most economic returns. So your skills will be needed. But if you also understand the non-technical considerations, the political considerations, there was a slide, there's only 1 minute left, but basically have a mindset of solving the problem, not throwing something out there. Don't try to criticize. It's really easy for any of us to criticize. I'm sure in your heads you have criticized a lot of things I've said with reason, because you are experts in GIS. But the point is, how can I overcome those criticisms to work together with Bruno so that we can solve land titles for women, or we can solve this whatever thing in India? There is this mindset that is as rare as you get more and more knowledgeable in a field, which is this positive, constructive attitude towards non-technical things, which we tend to lose. We tend to think, oh, just do what I say, because if you knew what I know, you would do what I say. And that's not how the world works, unfortunately. So my recommendation is to really think of what's your role into big global problems or local problems, and it's not only technical, and find the way to integrate yourselves into the rest of the stakeholders of that issue. If you are able to do that, you will become extremely valuable.
So I think our time is up. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Sanchez. It's been an incredible kind of experience to hear your thoughts on geospatial analytics and see all the wonderful projects that you've been involved in. On behalf of everyone in CGA, thank you so much for coming. Yeah, round of applause for Dr.
Thank you very much. And if you have questions, John, you can ping me or in Twitter. If Twitter continues to exist tomorrow, you can also find me there.
Yes, very true. All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.